Welcome to Conflict News 24. Today's bulletin includes news stories from Russia, Ukraine conflict. Last night, I reported that on Monday, Russia was going to make key decisions, and decisions were made. This morning, Ukraine was badly hit by Russian missiles. Dozens of Russian missiles hit different sites across Ukraine. We have details for you. Secondly, Alexander Lukashenko, Belarusian president, has announced the formation of joint regional military command with Russia. I have been updating you about tensions on Belarus-Ukraine border. Now, once again, Belarus and Russia are teaming up. Could there be a new attack on Ukraine from Belarus? Details for you. Firstly, viewers, on Saturday, a bridge linking Crimea with mainland Russia was blown up. Land bridge, road bridge, and rail bridge both suffered damage. Though traffic has been restored, bridge is open to traffic now. Putin said that it was an act of terrorism, that Russia would respond. On Monday, response was expected. And on Monday morning, this morning, Russia fired dozens of cruise missiles on Ukraine. From the Black Sea, from land, from air, around 100 missiles were fired on multiple sites in around 8 regions of Ukraine. Kyiv, Ukrainian capital, was hit. Lviv, western Ukraine, was hit. Dnipropetrovsk was hit. Zaporizhia was hit. 8 regions were hit. And targets, Putin says military targets were hit in precision strikes from sea, air, and land, but critical civil infrastructure was hit today. Bridges, train stations, mobile network infrastructure, IT infrastructure, all were hit. Power transmission lines, power stations were hit, and large parts of territories in these regions are without electricity. 10 casualties are being confirmed, around 100 injured. Russia says that Ukraine is siding with international terrorist organizations, and attack on Crimea bridge was an act of terrorism, and Russia is responding. So this was retaliatory strike from Russia on Ukraine, in which dozens of sites, around 10 sites, were hit in 8 zones of Ukraine. So war is again spreading, because there were no airstrikes, drone strikes on Ukraine capital Kyiv, western Ukraine Lviv, for months. Kyiv was the target of Russian offensive in February and March when this war broke out. Then front lines shifted towards eastern Ukraine, and Russians withdrew from the areas to the west and north of Kyiv. And the front lines shifted to Donbass mainly, then Zaporizhia, Kherson. But now central western parts of Ukraine are being bombarded by Russians. Russians today sent a message to Ukraine that if Ukraine keeps on hitting territories which are part of mainland Russia, or which are close to mainland Russia, Russia would respond. It is a sign of desperation as well, because in the battlefield, Russians are suffering losses, territorial losses. They have lost eastern Kharkiv. They have lost northern Donetsk. They're starting to lose towns in Luhansk. They have lost settlements in Kherson. So overall, Russia is under pressure in the battlefield. And while Russia is under pressure. Ukraine hit a key bridge linking Crimea with Russia. So that is why Putin was definitely under pressure at home for retaliation. And retaliation was today shown by Russia. So this is a sign of new escalation between Russia and Ukraine. Russia says Ukraine is siding with terrorist organizations and Ukrainian attacks will not go unpunished. Russia is openly accusing Ukraine of being involved in the attack on Crimea bridge, though Ukraine has not officially claimed the responsibility for attack on the bridge linking Crimea with Russia. Secondly, Russia reportedly today used Moldova's airspace for these missile strikes. The missiles fired from the Black Sea from a Russian ship flew over Moldova before hitting Ukraine. Moldova is protesting. Moldova today summoned Russian ambassador and registered its protest against Russian use of Moldova's airspace. So, Putin, in a statement a few hours ago, confirmed the strikes and he said it was a response to act of terrorism from Ukraine when Ukrainian intelligence officials hit bridge in Crimea. NATO is condemning, international community is condemning, and all are saying that Putin did not use nuclear weapons, but he is sending a message that if Russia is hit, Ukraine will suffer more. Overall, I see this development as an indication that Russia is desperate. I have been saying that in desperation, there could be some moves which could lead to escalation of this conflict. That is why we discuss the use of nuclear option, likely use of nuclear option, though Russia denies. Russia says it has no plans to use nuclear option. But in desperation, if Putin is under pressure, everything is expected. And that is what we saw. No one was expecting that Russia would hit 8 zones of Ukraine on Monday, but it happened. So if Russia keeps on suffering more setbacks in the battlefield, you could see more desperate moves from Russian military. We have 3 clips for you before sharing with you the new story about joint Russia-Belarus military command formation. First clip shows Putin. He spoke about today's retaliation from Russia against Ukrainian attack on Crimea bridge. Second clip shows how thousands of Ukrainians took refuge in subways in Kyiv, Ukrainian capital, while Russian missiles were hitting Kyiv, Ukrainian capital. And third clip shows missiles fired from a Russian ship from the Black Sea. The missiles, some of them flew over Moldova to hit Ukraine. Moldova is protesting. Watch 3 clips, then next news story.
Kyiv regime has placed itself alongside international terrorist organizations, the most notorious ones. And it is impossible to leave these crimes without a due response. This morning, on the initiative of the Ministry of Defense, and according to the plan, strikes using high-precision weapons from land, sea, and air carriers were made against objects in the Ukrainian territory. We will make a serious steps to provide an adequate response commensurate with the level of threats created to the Russian Federation. Nobody should have any doubts as to
Сегодня российскими войсками нанесен массированный удар высокоточным оружием большой дальности по объектам систем военного управления, связи и энергетики Украины.
Alexander Lukashenko, Belarusian President Putin's ally in power for more than 2 decades, has announced the formation of joint regional military command with Russia. What does it mean? Details have not been shared. Lukashenko today held a meeting of Belarusian National Security Council, and after that he announced the formation of this joint military command with Russia. Tensions rising on Belarus-Ukraine border. Both Ukraine and Belarus are accusing each other of preparing for attack. Ukraine says from Belarus an attack on Ukraine is in the making. Belarus says that NATO, Ukraine planning to attack Belarus. Belarus sided with Russia in February, March when Russian forces entered Ukraine. They entered from Belarus and from Russia. So back then, Belarusian soil was used by Russian military. After that, Russia suffered losses. It could not capture Kyiv, Ukrainian capital, and it decided to withdraw its forces from the areas to the north and west of Kyiv. Now, once again, mobilization movement of Russian military to Belarus is being seen. Thousands of troops are deployed on both sides of Belarus-Ukraine border. What does this joint military command formation mean? Does it mean that Russia and Belarus are planning another joint attack on Ukraine from the north? It could happen. Preparations are there. Because Russia, the way it is suffering losses in eastern Ukraine, it could make a new move towards Ukraine from the north, though it would be difficult for Russia to sustain military operations from Belarus towards Kyiv, while it has lost its ground in Kharkiv, and it is still losing ground in eastern part of Kharkiv, in Donetsk, and now in Lugansk as well. But reportedly preparations are underway. That is why this joint regional military command has been established by Russian and Belarusian governments. No details shared by Lukashenko so far. Thank you for watching.